Iran's water shortage has led to fear, anger, and deadly protests. The water supply issues have been affecting the country's Khuzestan province since March. And so for more on this crisis, I'm joined now by Kaveh Madani. He is the senior fellow at Yale and a former deputy head of Iran's Department of Environment. Kaveh, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Kaveh, let's begin with this crisis of a lack of water in the province. Why is this happening in Iran right now?
Iran in general and Khuzestan as well is facing what I refer to as a status of water bankruptcy. Essentially, water consumption has been much more than water demand for years, and now we face a situation that there are lots of stakeholders who have water rights, but their water rights cannot be satisfied because there is no enough water available in the province and in other parts of Iran. Iran essentially first used its checking account, its surface water, then went after its saving account, the water it inherited from the previous generations, it's groundwater, and now lots of developments have happened. Industry is thirsty, agriculture and farmers are thirsty, and cities are thirsty. And with that, when that happens, unemployment occurs. People come out and shout and ask for water. Tension is always comes with water shortage, and this is not the first time this is happening somewhere in the world. Unfortunately, we never learned a lesson.
There's a lot to unpack there, Kaveh. Let's begin with, when you say these places are thirsty, is there literally no water? If people turn on their taps, does nothing come out? And how are people surviving if there is no water?
Depends on the location. There are some villages, that more than 700 villages, which don't have water. They supply them with tankers. There are some cities that don't have, many cities actually in the province don't have clean water supply. So people have been using different treatment equipment at home to deal with that. This is not new, actually. That has been there for a long time. But then there are farmers who at this point in time require water to finalize the growth of their crop and prepare them for selling soon, and that is not happening. And if you have seen images from Iran, you would see that the wetlands are thirsty, not much water in the famous Karun River, the only navigable river in Iran, and industries are also suffering. Plus, water from this basin and from this province is being transferred to other provinces in Iran. So there are also thirsty users in other regions of the country who are dependent on the water that flows into Khuzestan. So people are unhappy in many places at the moment.
So we know that people have taken to the streets. We know the protests have been loud and angry, and they've often turned deadly. We keep seeing reports of people being killed for protesting, demanding water. What's your sense of why that's happening?
We always say that water can be, an excuse for war and an excuse for a cooperation. Once the protests start, people no longer would ask for water. It's the accumulation of anger for lots of different reasons. Lack of water only justifies the expression of anger. Once people come out, things can get out of control. So it starts as a water protest, but soon after is no longer a water protest. This is a social crisis, and people have lots of demands and lots of good reasons to be angry at the system. If we look at the Syrian case, for example, and I hope that Iran would not turn into Syria, but a drought played a major role in taking anger to the next level and acting as a trigger. So water shortage can always function as that if the decision makers don't pay enough attention to the upcoming water shortages, which would happen in other parts of Iran and which would happen in other parts of the Middle East and the rest of the world.
And are those decision makers paying attention to this water shortage?
I mean, of course, now they do, and they're seeing it. It's too visible to deny, but we need decision makers to get prepared for the extreme events. They must have paid attention to this issue decades ago. Iran is a dry region in general, and the Iranian leaders, like the other Middle Eastern leaders, must have paid attention to water as a limit to growth. But being too rich and having the oil money got them confused. They thought that with spending the oil money and buying technology, and they can engineer the system and overcome this limitation. And what we are seeing there is proving them wrong.
Kaveh, you were in a position of great authority in Iran, and this was your area of expertise. Did you ever sound the alarm? And if you did, what kind of response did you get?
I mean, the reason that I couldn't continue working, is that my alarms were painful and some were bitter to the system. I was invited to go to Iran and work, and I got arrested upon arrival, and for a short only for a short period of time was able to work there, and eventually I had to flee the country. These things, people like myself have been talking about it for years. We have been sending messages. We have been talking about this upcoming situation, but they always blamed us and myself as being a traitor, saying these things because I want to, we want to show the country, we want to say that the country is weak and cannot stand on its own feet. And they didn't realize that we were saying this for helping them. They did shoot themselves in the foot, and they didn't pay attention to this note that what we are seeing today is the result of decades of bad management, lack of foresight, poor governance, and it wasn't created overnight, and it cannot be solved overnight, unfortunately.
Kaveh, you know that the Iranian government and representatives and decision makers, as you say, have said that, well, this is the natural occurrence from climate change. And they've also blamed U.S. sanctions against the country. What do you make of that response from them?
A lot of us in the scientific community and in the decision-making community like to climatize the extreme events, whether they are in Western Canada or U.S., whether they're where we have heat waves and wildfires, whether there are floods in Germany, whether droughts in Iran. One side, the academics like to climatize it to get the events, to get the attention of the globe, to get the attention of the decision makers, so they take action on climate change. And on the other side, we have the decision makers who welcome this opportunity to blame things on exogenous forces and say that they were not responsible. So sanctions and climate change and corruption and many other things, these factors function as a catalyst of a process. They exacerbate the situation. They have a multiplying effect. They're not the cause of the problem. COVID-19 crisis did the same thing. It exacerbated the situation. It put pressure on economies, but it's not the cause of what is happening in the world. If we had got prepared for this moment in history, we wouldn't have had suffered this much. The same applies to Iran. It's easy to blame things on the enemy and on natural forces, but the reality is Iran is prone to droughts and floods. The last time we talked, it was about the flood in Khuzestan, in the very same province. And floods and droughts are there, and we should live with that, and we should understand that they are natural, and get prepared for it and make our systems resilient. And this is something that the Iranians haven't done, the Germans haven't done, the Canadians and the Americans haven't.
Okay. Kaveh, thank you so much for your time and for your insights.
Thank you.
Kaveh Madani is the former deputy head of Iran's Department of Environment.